everybody, and welcome to Evelyn Taylor Majure's Black American Women Innovators series. This week, we will be profiling the incredibly gifted Dr. Gwendolyn Elizabeth Brooks. Gwendolyn Brooks was a poet. In fact, she was the poet's poet, one of the most prolific poets of the 20th century. Gwendolyn Elizabeth Brooks was born on June 7, 1917 in Topeka, Kansas. Her mother, Kesia Brooks, and her father, David Anderson Brooks, moved Gwendolyn to Chicago in 1917. Dr. Brooks spent the rest of her life living and writing poetry and prose about the Windy City. Like most families moving during the Great Migration, it was to provide better lives and educational opportunities for their children. Gwendolyn's education moved between two cultures, black schools on the south side of Chicago and prominent white schools in Hyde Park and Englewood, Chicago. This piano keyboard education was significant in shaping her poetry. In the 40s and the 50s, she wrote in classical style. Her style changed in the 60s as she identified more with the black arts movement and black nationalism. Gwendolyn Brooks started publishing her poetry at the age of 13. By the time she was 17, the Chicago Defender, an African-American newspaper in Chicago, was publishing her works in its Lights and Shadows Poetry Corner. Gwendolyn Brooks always knew she wanted to be a poet. She went to Wilson Junior College and became a typist to support herself. Dr. Brooks could write any style of poetry or prose, sonnets, ballads, epics, while later transitioning to free verse, bebop jazz, and blues rhythmic style of the 60s. Her book of poetry, The Bean Eaters, published in 1960, featured We Be Cool. Three of the most famous members of the Harlem Renaissance, James Weldon Johnson, Richard Wright, and Langston Hughes, became her biggest supporters. Dr. Brooks wrote what she knew best, inner city living. Brooks said, "I lived in a small second-floor apartment at the corner, and I could look first on one side and then the other, and there was my material." In 1941, Gwendolyn Brooks joined a poetry workshop at the Southside Community Arts Center. She studied with Inez Cunningham Stark. Inez Stark was a very wealthy white woman with a very impressive literary background. Langston Hughes came to one of Gwendolyn's workshops to hear her read Ballad of Pearl May Lee. Ballad of Pearl May Lee was published in her first book of poems, A Street in Bronzeville, published in 1945. Richard Wright said, "There is no self-pity here, not a striving for effects. She takes hold of reality as it is and renders it faithfully." A Street in Bronzeville earned well-deserved attention. Paul Engle, a writer for the Chicago Tribune, commented that Gwendolyn Brooks' poems were no more Negro poetry than Robert Frost's works were white poetry. In 1946, Dr. Brooks was included in Mademoiselle magazine as one of the 10 Young Women of the Year. Miss Brooks' poems were edgy and completely socially engaging. Gwendolyn Brooks' poem, Gay Chaps at the Bar, was in support of the Double V campaign. The Pittsburgh Carrier started the campaign in 1942. The Pittsburgh Carrier was the largest black circulating newspaper in the country, so the Chicago Defender joined the campaign. The double V's are for victory abroad from tyranny and oppression, victory at home from inequality and suppression. Gwendolyn expressed herself best with her poetry. It was like life in Bronzeville, take it or leave it. At the age of 33 in 1950, Gwendolyn Elizabeth Brooks was the first African American to win the Pulitzer Prize for her second book of poetry, Annie Allen, published in 1949. Dr. Brooks said when she found out she had won a Pulitzer Prize for poetry, she was a little worried the light bill for the apartment hadn't been paid. So when she opened the front door, reporters and photographers rushed into her apartment. Gwendolyn was about to explain about the lights when they just came on. Someone had paid the bill. Annie Allen, her Pulitzer Award-winning poetry book, was a young black woman's epic existential journey into coming of age. It was in the Greek epic storytelling style. Gwendolyn Brooks wrote 20 books of poetry in classical and free verse style. She taught creative writing at Northwestern University and in 1968 was appointed Poet Laureate for the state of Illinois. Dr. Brooks' search for self-awareness, self-respect, and dignity became a true work of poetry. Gwendolyn Brooks, still do I keep my look, my identity. Each body has its art, its precious prescribed pose, that even in passion's droll contortions, waltzes, or push of pain, or when a grief has stabbed, or hate hacked, it is its and nothing else's. Each body has its pose, no other stock, that is irrevocably perpetual. Gwendolyn Brooks died December 3rd in the year 2000 at the age of 83. She was buried at Lincoln Cemetery in Blue Island, Illinois. If you'd like to learn more about Dr. Gwendolyn Brooks, please go to jhlibrary.org or get in touch with us at cdixon@jhlibrary.org, and we'll be glad to tell you everything we know about this wonderful woman. Well, next week we will be profiling the cartoonist Jackie Ohms. We'll see you next week, and you guys have a great day.